get ready for a deep, low lunge with the back knee down. So place a blanket on your sticky mat as you see here, and that will be the padding for the knee that will drop down. And then stand at the front of your sticky mat with a block on either side of each foot. Stand tall in mountain pose. Stand tall in mountain pose with energized legs. And then bring your hands down to the blocks and step your left foot back. Gather the outer right hip back and in. Lift the back thigh up. Lengthen the spine from bottom to top. Long trunk here, long abdomen. And let your hips sink down to be the height of the front knee. And then let your hips sink even further down as you reach the left thigh further back, and then place the left knee down on the blanket, and then untuck your back toes. So the front of the shin and the front of the foot and the back leg is resting down on the blanket and the sticky mat, and sink your hips forward and down. So the whole sacrum is relaxing and releasing forwards, and then lift your low belly so that you lift your trunk up and out of the pelvis. Bending deeply in the front knee, pull the outer right hip back. Pull the right femur back towards the hip socket. Pull the outer right hip back and also towards the midline. Gather your hips towards each other. Lift the low belly. Kick the back shin into the sticky mat. And then tuck your back toes under, lift your back thigh, and step your back foot forward. Then now step your right foot back, first coming into a simple lunge. Gather the left femur back towards the hip socket. Lift the back thigh. Let your hips come down to be the same height as the front knee. Gather your hips together and lengthen your spine. And then walk your right leg even further back. Extend that right thigh further back. Sink your hips down and then lower the back knee down onto the blanket. And rest the top of your back foot down onto the sticky mat. Kick the right shin down into the ground as you take your hips forward, letting the whole sacrum move forward. The tailbone moves into the body, and then lift your low belly and gather your outer left hip from the outer knee to the hip socket. So the outer left hip gathers back and in towards the midline. Squeeze your outer hips together, lift the deep low belly again, and lengthen through the anterior spine, kicking the right shin down. Bending deeply in the front knee. Smooth breathing here. And then tuck your back toes and lift your back thigh. And step your back foot forward. Bend your knees, relax and release your head down. And then take your hands to hips and stretch your chest forward to come on up. And now we'll practice a deep lunge with a side bend. So lower your hands down onto the blocks and step your left foot back into a lunge. Deep in the lunge, keep the back leg active. Gather the right femur into the hip socket. And then elongate the left leg further back and lower the back knee down. Let the tailbone move into the body and lift the low belly. Gather your outer right thigh towards the hip. So pull from the outer right knee to the outer hip energetically. And then take the block that's on the right side of your foot and move that block all the way out to the right, in line with your right hip and out to the side. And then take a side bend into that right hand, which is on the block. So we're in a deep lunge and then adding a side bend to that as well. Leaning over to the right, gathering that outer right femur into the hip socket, and then gather both outer hips towards each other. Lift the low belly. Let the sacrum move forward towards the front heel. Bend further to the side. And then swing your left arm around, back down to the block. Lift your back thigh up as you tuck the toes. And step your back foot forward. And then bend your knees and step your right foot back into a lunge for the other side. Square your hips here by gathering that left femur towards the hip socket. Keep the back inner thigh lifting. Lengthen the spine here, buoyant in the belly. Reach the right thigh further back and then drop the right knee down. And then let the pelvis sink forward towards that front heel. Lift the low belly. Gather your outer hips in and take the block that's under your left hand and move it all the way out to the side in line with your left hip. And then start to side bend yourself, lifting the right arm up and over, side bend to the left. Let the tailbone move forward, bend the front knee, lift the low belly, kick the right foot into the floor, and bend even deeper to the side. Side bending to the left. Gather the outer left thigh from the outer knee to the outer hip and gather the hips towards the midline. Tailbone anchoring deeper into the body. And then swing your arm forward and around to come back to the block. Lift the back thigh to come into a simple lunge again. And then step your back foot forward, soft knees, hands to the outer hips, stretch your chest forward and come up. Now we'll practice Warrior One with the back heel on the wall. So set up as you see here, the right foot forward and the left heel on the wall. Square hips, feet about hips width apart. Hands on hips, lengthening the waist. Lift your arms up overhead. Lift the low belly to lift from underneath the heart, to lift from under the collarbones. Keep lengthening up through the arms, and then bend the right knee so the knee comes directly over your right heel. And press your left heel into the wall. And see if you can square the hips. Pull your right femur back to pull the outer right hip back. And let the left hip come forward so that you find yourself more square, but keep your back thigh engaged so that your back leg is very straight. And bend the front knee forward and then lift the low belly to lift the rib cage, to lift the arms, spread the hands. Make more space between your thumbs and your back heel. Pull the outer right hip back and towards the midline. And then inhale and straighten your front leg. And exhale, push your back foot off the wall to change sides. And now bring the left foot forward and step your right heel back onto the wall. Make sure that your feet are hip width apart. And then square your hips, left hip back, right hip forward. And then lengthen the sides of your waist up. Let your shoulders go back. Lift the whole rib cage. And then stretch your arms up, pulling the thumbs back, stretching the pinky fingers up. And keep pressing your back heel into the wall as you bend your front knee deeply. And then square the hips again, pulling the left femur back. Lift the low belly. And then lift your rib cage three-dimensionally upwards. See if you can find a deep internal ascension through the front of the spine. And continue that lift up through the armpits and through the extended arms, strong and straight in the back leg. Back heel presses into the wall, front knee reaches forward. And then inhale and straighten the front leg. And exhale your arms out to the sides and down. Hands to hips, and step your feet together to recover. And now come to the wall for a variation of downward facing dog. So place your sticky mat against the wall and place your blocks down at shoulder distance apart, blocks against the wall. And then step up into a down dog position with hands on blocks, heels of the hands coming off the edge of the blocks just a little bit. Bend your knees and lift the buttocks way up high. Stretch your legs up into the height of the hips. Stretch the fronts of your legs. Stretch open the backs of your legs. Open the backs of the knees and pull your outer hips back and pull your pelvis up and back. Stretch through the armpits. Extend through the arms. Let your head get heavy and your tail get lighter. And then step your feet together and lift your right leg up into the sky. See if you can reach your left heel back and down as you lift your right leg higher, keeping it internally rotated for a moment, lifting the inner right thigh up. Pull the pelvis up and back, especially the left outer hip, pulling up and back there. And then open your right hip just for a moment to feel that opening, and then square off your right hip again. Pull the rib cage up and away from the blocks. And then lower your right leg down and lift the left leg up and back behind you for a one-leg dog. Pull the outer right hip back, lift the left leg higher and stretch the back of the leg. Pull your right heel back and down and pull your rib cage off of the shoulder sockets, up and back towards the pelvis. Pull the outer right hip back even more as you open the left hip. Keep elongating up through the left leg, and then square the hips again. Pull the pelvis up and back. Stretch long through the armpits, grounding through the hands, spreading wide in the fingers. Lift the left leg even more, keeping the legs straight if you can. And then lower the left leg down and widen your feet again so they're hip distance apart. Lift up through the musculature of the legs. Head releasing. And then bend your knees and lower your knees down to come out of the pose. Now we'll do a quad stretch with the wall, and you need a blanket and 2 blocks as well. Please fold up the blanket as you see here and place that folded blanket on the sticky mat and against the wall. And then sit on your shins directly in front of that blanket with your back pointing towards the wall. And then have the blocks underneath your hands alongside your body. And inch yourself back so that your feet are up on the blanket and your knees are still on the mat. And then as you see here, place your left shin against the wall so the left knee is on the blanket and the top of your foot is pressing against the wall. And then lean into the blocks with your hands so that you can place your right foot between the blocks. So that front leg is in a front leg lunge position. And start to pull the whole sacrum forward towards the front heel. And kick the top of your back foot into the wall. Make your hips square. Pull the outer right hip back and in. Think of squeezing your hips from the outer to the inner. Gather your hips towards each other and lift your low belly up off of the pelvis. And as you lunge here, think of the front of the pelvis lifting. Think of the kidney area, the back of your rib cage, the lower back ribs lifting and spreading. Bend the front knee, square the hips. Gather the hips, lift the low belly, let the tailbone move in, lift the frontal hips, lengthen the spine. And then move the blocks forward a little bit, bring your front shin down, and then bring your back shin down, and we'll switch sides. Now bring the right knee onto the blanket. Lean into the blocks and step your left foot between the blocks and kick the top of your back foot into the wall. Pull the outer left hip back and in. Squeeze your outer hips together and lift the low belly. Lift the front of the pelvis. Lengthen all the way through the spine, through the top of the head. Spread the back bottom rib area. Lift the front of the pelvis again, and then sink the tailbone forward and in, deeper into your body, bending that front knee. Enjoy having those blocks to support the hands and the arms, to support your upper body. Again, gather those hips together, square and gather the hips. Low belly lifting, front of the pelvis lifting. Sink deeper into the lunge. And then come out of the pose, bringing the front shin down and then the back shin down. Hands on thighs. Breathe here to recover. And now have your sticky mat at the wall and 2 blocks handy for a variation of Urdhva Dhanurasana. So place your blocks at the wall on an incline, as you see here. Make the blocks about shoulder distance apart, and then lay down on your back with the top of your head very close to the wall and your head right between the blocks. Knees bent and feet flat. And then place your hands on the blocks as you would prepare for Urdhva Dhanurasana. Fingertips pointing towards your shoulders. And then anchor your elbows towards the shoulder sockets. Feet are parallel. And press your feet into the floor, press your hands into the blocks, and lift the tailbone, the pelvis, the buttocks all the way up and start to straighten the arms. Be even in your weight between legs and arms. So push a little towards the leg side and a little towards the arm side. Lift up the heels and lift the buttocks and the tailbone more. And then let the heels ground down as you lift the tailbone even deeper into the body, stretching through the arms. And then tuck your chin towards your chest as you come all the way down. And rest. And now we'll do a version of gate pose at the wall. So place your sticky mat against the wall as you see here, and then spread your blanket out on the mat near the wall and sit on your shins. And then lift your left arm up and place the whole left side of your body very close to the wall, standing up on the knees. And place your right foot down on your sticky mat so that your right foot is even in front of the line of the left knee. So that right leg is a little bit in front of you. And then start to side bend away from the wall. Press your left hip into the wall and then lengthen the whole side body up and over to the right. Press the right foot down. Press the right elbow into the right inner knee to keep that knee open, and stand up tall on your left shin. So don't let the buttocks go back and down, but rather pull the buttocks forward and under you. Lengthen your spine and then side bend more to the right. Lift the buttocks up and under you. Press the left hip into the wall. And then inhale, get taller and come out of the pose. And then stretch your right leg out for a second variation. Make sure that your heel is a little bit in front of you. And then start to side bend towards the right foot. Again, keeping the buttocks reaching forward and under you, standing tall on the left shin. Stretching the left side body up and over. Right hand resting on right shin. Parigasana, like the latch of a gate. Take your body up and over to the right. Open the left ribs to the ceiling. Let the abdomen recede and lengthen. And then inhale and come all the way up, letting your left arm come up against the wall. And then move away from the wall as you lower onto your shins and take a rest. And then spin around for the other side. Stand up on your right shin and press your right foot down. Make sure your left foot is a little bit in front of you and the left knee is open. So the right arm is going up the wall, and then connect your right outer hip to the wall and start to side bend over to the left. So that left elbow is pressing back into the left inner knee to keep that knee open. Scoop the buttocks forward. Lift the front of the pelvis up. Lift the low belly. Lengthen your spine. Get longer and then go more to the side. Anchor your right hip to the wall. Anchor your left elbow to the left inner knee. And then open the right ribs and go more over to the side. Scoop the buttocks forward. Stand tall on the right shin. Lengthen and go deeper. Open the right ribs to the ceiling. Lift the low belly. Press the left foot into the floor. And then inhale and come up, walking the right arm up the wall. And start to straighten the left leg, flexing the foot. Foot is very alive. Scoop the buttocks forward so it's really under you, and then start to side bend left. So make sure it's not a back bend, but rather it's a true side bend. So let that left buttock drop down and under you. Scoop the tailbone forward. Lengthen the trunk and go to the side. Left hand on left shin. Right hip pressing into the wall. Open the right ribs. Long arms, long spine. Scooping the buttocks under you. Standing tall in the right shin. Deepen your breath here. And then inhale and come up, right arm against the wall. And scoochie yourself away from the wall. Sit on shins and recover. Now we'll practice a reverse bridge. So sit down on your buttocks. Have your knees bent and feet flat in front of you. Hands behind you with your fingers pointing towards your buttocks. Feet parallel. And then press into your feet and your hands and lift the buttocks up as you see here. Lifting the right and left sides of the tailbone up. Lift the rib cage up off of your arms. Gather your outer knees in towards each other and lift the buttocks and the tailbone and the shoulder blades so much that you can let your head release back. Grounding the inner feet, gathering the outer knees. And then exhale and release your buttocks down. And now turn your hands so that your fingertips point all the way back. Shoulders back, feet are grounded, and then scoop the buttocks and lift the buttocks up again. Gather the outer thighs, lift the center buttocks, lift the outer hips. Let the inner thighs release down as you lift the outer hips more and lift the shoulder blades more and let the head release back. Extend through the elbows. Press into the feet. And then exhale and sit your buttocks back down. Now grab a bolster and a blanket and we'll practice camel pose. So place your blanket down on the sticky mat so that your shins have some padding. And stand on your shins on the blanket and then place the bolster right on top of your heels. And then you can go ahead and sit down on the bolster. Pull your sitting flesh back so that you can sit up nice and tall. And be here in neutral just for a moment. And then press your fingertips down onto the bolster, leaning back onto your hands, and start to lift your pelvis up and forward to come into camel. Lift your shoulder blades up towards the front of the rib cage as you lift the sternum up and back and come into the back bend here, and finally releasing the head back. Think of the outer thighs squeezing in, tailbone anchoring forwards, inner thighs reaching back a little bit, pelvis moving forward, and reach the shoulder blades up towards the ceiling for support. Press into the fingertips, and then come out of the pose by lifting the chest up and then sit back down on the bolster. Now grab a blanket and spread it out on your sticky mat as you see here, and lay down so that your frontal hips have some padding. So lay down onto the blanket, belly down, lengthen your legs back, and then bend your knees and grab onto your ankles for Dhanurasana, bow pose. And start to lift the thighs up. Keep your knees magnetized towards each other. Kick your ankles back into your hands and then lift the ankles up. You can literally lift the ankles up with your hands and also use your legs to lift the shins and heels up towards the ceiling. Let the outer shoulders lift up, breathing here. And then exhale and release down. Now we'll do another version of Dhanurasana with a slightly different way of activating in the pose. Lengthen your thighs back to prepare, and then bend your knees and grab onto your ankles. And this time, instead of lifting the thighs, think of grounding the knees down towards the sticky mat, grounding the thighs firmly, and kick your feet back. Kick your feet back to lift the collarbones up. Lift the arms up. Kick those feet back and squeeze the outer knees and outer thighs in towards the midline. And then exhale and release down. Now we'll practice Supta Virasana. So kneel on your spread out blanket as you see here, and bring the top of your head to the floor, and then bring your hands onto the upper calves so that you can turn the shin bones so the front shins point down and the calves move out to the side slightly. The calves also should get pulled slightly down towards the heels. So adjust your shins in this way, and then start to sit your buttocks down and start to lay yourself back out onto the bolster. Also remember to pull the flesh of the buttocks away from the low back and towards the backs of the knees. And then lay yourself all the way back and grab onto opposite elbows. Think of reaching the thigh bones forward and towards each other. And think of elongating the trunk as you breathe. And then switch the cross of the arms. And now open up your arms out to the sides so that the arms are at about shoulder height, spreading wide through the chest, spreading long through the trunk. And then use your hands to help you come on up, coming onto hands and knees. And stretch your right leg back into a lunge position, tucking your toes under, and stretch out that leg, opening the back of the knee. And then stretch the left leg back, switching legs, opening the back of the left knee. Now we'll practice pigeon pose. So start on hands and knees with a blanket underneath your knees and shins for padding. And bring your right knee forward and align yourself so that your right knee is a little bit wider than your outer hip. The front leg is folded into pigeon position, and then tuck the back toes under, lift the thigh, and internally rotate that thigh so that the outer left thigh is dropping down, so that the hips become more square, and pull the right femur back towards the hip socket. And keep that activity going as you support your upper body with the fingertips. Lift up through the belly, lift up through the side ribs, shoulders back. And be here in this upright pigeon. Tailbone is anchoring, low belly is buoyant. Long in the side ribs, squaring the hips here. And then lengthen yourself out as you come down onto forearms and breathe into your kidney area a little bit here. Breathing into the backs of the lungs, spreading the kidneys. Letting the abdomen settle back towards the spine here. And breathe into the sensations of the outer right hip. See if you can gather the right femur into the hip socket more deeply. Gather the flesh of the right thigh from the outer right knee to the outer hip. You can gently gather your outer hips both towards each other, towards the midline. And then if it's available to you, you can walk your hands even further forward and let your forehead come down onto the sticky mat. Elongating your trunk here. Active arms. And breathe into the sensations in the right hip. Observing here, deepen your breath. And then start to walk your hands back to come up to a seated pigeon. And lift the sternum from bottom to top. Spread the collarbones wide, shoulders back, and look up. And then come back onto hands and knees. And take your left knee forward for pigeon, taking the left knee quite wide so that it's wider than the left hip. Walk your hands back and sit tall in this seated pigeon. And then tuck your back toes under. Lift the back thigh for a moment and internally rotate that back thigh so that the outer right thigh can drop down as the hips become more square. And then spread wide the collarbones and lift the low belly and start to look up. And lengthen through the anterior spine, lengthen the front side of your trunk, shoulders back. Squaring the hips here as you gather the left femur deeper into the hip socket, gathering the flesh of the left thigh from the outer knee to the outer hip, gathering the outer hips towards the midline. Shoulders back, elbows back, buoyant belly. And give another lift under the collarbones to lengthen the throat and look up. And then come down onto your forearms and breathe into the kidneys here. Let the right hip settle down. Breathe into the sensations in the outer left hip. Let the abdomen settle towards the spine. Elongate the spine from the tail all the way through the top of the head. Resting on the forearms here. And then if you can, if you'd like to, you can reach your arms further forward with very extended arms and armpits and let your forehead rest down on the sticky mat. Breathing deeply here, breathing into the sensations of the left hip. Smooth inhalations, smooth exhalations. And start to walk your hands back now to come up into a seated pigeon again. Shoulders and elbows back, side ribs long, shoulder blades sliding down the back as you lift the low belly. And then step yourself back into hands and knees to come out of the pose. Now we'll practice Supta Padangusthasana 2. So have a blanket and a strap with you. Lay down on your back, knees bent and feet flat, neutral pelvis. And stretch your arms up overhead along the floor and lengthen out your trunk as you breathe. And then make sure that your folded blanket is to your right. And lasso the right heel with your strap. Stretch your right leg up to the ceiling and then stretch your left leg long. And just start to extend fully the backs of the knees if you can. And now bring the blanket close to the outer right hip and hold on to the strap with your right hand only. Spread the left arm to the left and start to open up your right leg out to the right. So the blanket is supporting you underneath the outer right thigh. Keep the left leg extending and think of the low belly spreading to the left to balance out the right leg going to the right. Long in the abdomen. And start to notice the way that that right thigh is rotating in the hip socket. If you rotate it in slightly, you might get a very different stretch in your inner thigh. If you keep your leg at around the height of the hip, it will be different than if you pull the right leg up towards the armpit. So breathe here as you explore stretching different parts of the inner thigh. Stay grounded in that left thigh. And then inhale and come up to center. And we'll switch sides. So place your blanket on the other side, so it's to the left of you, and lasso the left heel with the strap. Extend the left leg up first, and then extend the right leg. Internally rotating in that right leg, outer left hip pulling away from the left waist, backs of the knees opening, long in the spine, shoulder blades sliding down the back. And then pull the blanket towards the outer left hip, very close, and grab onto the strap close to your foot with your left hand only. Spread the right arm to the right, spread the low belly to the right as the leg opens out to the left. And experiment here with rotating the leg so that you can turn in slightly. A little bit of internal rotation in the hip socket or a little bit of external rotation in the hip socket will give you a different stretch. It might stretch different parts of the inner thigh. Grounded in that right thigh, even in the waist. Right and left waists are long, long abdomen. And then bring the left leg all the way up to center. And release, bending the knees, feet flat. And have 2 blocks handy now for Setu Bandhasana with 2 blocks under the sacrum. So lay down with knees bent and feet flat, neutral pelvis. And have 1 block near your left hip and 1 block near your right hip. And then ground down through the feet. Feet are a little wider than sitting bones. Press your arms down to lift the hips up. And then gather your blocks together. So the blocks are on the highest height and they come directly adjacent to each other so that you can rest your sacrum right onto the blocks. So take a moment to find a place where your sacrum, right around the upper buttocks, feels very supported. And then interlace your fingers around the block and walk your shoulders closer together underneath you. Ground down through the arms. Let the buttocks, let the sacrum rest onto the support of the blocks. Press the shoulder blades into the rib cage so the chest moves towards the chin. Stay grounded in the feet. And then as you stay here, you can start to relax more and more. So you might find that you'd like to release the interlace of the fingers and just let your arms relax here with the palms face up. And breathe here, smooth inhalations and steady exhalations. Hug your shoulder blades into the rib cage, gather your outer knees towards each other, and then lift the heels to lift the buttocks and remove the blocks, and then roll yourself all the way down till the pelvis is resting on the sticky mat. Now we'll practice a lovely, simple version of Supta Baddha Konasana without any props. So lay down on your back and adjust the flesh of your buttocks so it moves away from the lower back. And then bring the soles of the feet together and the knees open. And we'll do this with no support so that gravity is your prop here. Gravity is what's helping you and informing you in this pose. See if you can just surrender your legs to gravity. And let your shoulder blades slide down your back and then stretch your arms out in a Shavasana position so that you can relax here. Let your trunk and spine be long. See if you can breathe here with your whole body. Relaxing the pelvis and the buttocks, relaxing the groins. Feel where your body is making contact with the floor. Contact with the sticky mat. And then start to lift your knees up. You can use your hands to help you if that feels right. Feet flat. And then roll over to your side to come on up.